and welcome to Kindred, the podcast where we aim to, at the very least, normalize, but hopefully learn to respect and even maybe grow to love animals in nature, even the ones that we might deem, well, insignificant, possibly gross. Sister, welcome. Are there any animals that you're super adverse to, I'd say?
Well, I would say that I have definitely had a list in my life of things
Uh-huh.
that were either
Haven't we
creepy
all?
to me
Mhm.
or I had an aversion to, or I was just straight up afraid of. But I'm
Mhm.
proud to say that some of them I've learned to deal with better on my own. And some of them, because of this podcast, I have had some help with. So
Uh-huh.
I used to be real creeped out by possums because when we lived
Ah.
in my lifetime,
Mhm.
had a house where we had a back deck, and I was too lazy to, when we didn't have any trees near it. I just had a feeder that sat on the railing of the
Oh, like a
deck,
bird feeder? Oh,
a
yeah.
bird feeder.
Yeah.
And
Uh-huh.
one night when I was doing something, I looked out and there was a possum
Mm-hmm.
chowing down on my bird seed. And when I
Sure.
turned on the light and opened the door, it turned to me with its pink eyes, and it
Uh-huh.
went,
It
and
hissed at you? Uh-huh.
it hissed a hard lot at me. And I was like, I went in my house and I found some oranges. And I started throwing at it because I wanted to go away because I was so grossed out by it. I don't know. I don't think I was a very good shot. I'm not very good at throwing, but, and I was just like, oh,
Yes,
they're so
possums are
creepy.
good. They're a good example
And
of
their
that.
tails are creepy to me, but
I know,
that
unless,
they aren't
until,
anymore because I used to volunteer at a wildlife clinic, and we got possums in all the time. And I
yeah.
learned, because now I know about possums, that they're actually pretty cute. And when you see a baby possum, it's hard to think that they're creepy. They're
Yeah.
so freaking cute.
They are
So
very cute.
that's my
Exactly.
long story to say yes and no to that.
Well, we'll have to do we'll have to do an episode on possums because
Yeah,
they really are so fantastic for the environment. They eat
they
all the
are.
things nobody wants
They are.
to. And,
Yes.
but listen, you throw a snake at my face and I'm going to have a literal stroke. That's an
I think
animal
most
that
people would, right?
for sure. But they would be one that I've come to respect. And I do
Yes.
care for snakes to the
Right.
point where I have actually taken them by hand out of my
You've had
house.
to by
Hmm. That
necessity.
is
Yeah.
another story full of expletives. This would have to
Yeah.
be an X-rated show that
That's right.
we would
You'd
have to
have to
put that little E
put a
by it.
warning on it, content
Hmm.
warning. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely, because and this poor snake, once I got her out, she was literally like calm. She's looking at me, I swear. She was like, girl, I don't know what just happened here, but you need to, I'm okay. I'm okay. We're all good here. She was a really sweet little snake. Anyway,
Mm,
um, and it's partly why I'm looking forward to introducing you all to our guest today. Talk about a great animal to get to know and learn how astonishing a species can be. Before I would have almost dismissed this species, and I think many people are repulsed by.
hmm.
So today, just to let everyone know, we're doing a book club episode, and that's where we highlight authors doing critical work and reconnecting us with animals or nature through literature, even those ones we don't love so much.
Hmm.
But before we get to our guest today, I wanted to tell you about our new YouTube channel. Do you even know about this, sister?
No, actually, I don't.
It's great. It's
Like we said.
terrible, terrible news. It's great news. LOL. So if you're someone who enjoys watching podcasts or prefers YouTube for all things video, you can now find us and join us there. So just head to our website, kindredpodcast.co, and you can click the link on our homepage, or there's a link via our Instagram. And there you'll find a bunch of videos, archived episodes, and new episodes to explore. Honestly, I never thought podcasts would cross into the video world, but we are, and we're rolling with it. Let's just say that. I mean, I
This is
thought
what the young people like. This is what they like.
a lot of people like it, and I thought I was gonna never have to worry about any of that with podcasts. Little did I know that
Yeah, bad
everything
news.
changed with
Yeah,
podcasts
right?
all the time. So
Right.
great news for our viewers, bad news for you and me. But we're going to be so brave. Anyway, okay, let's get
Okay.
into our episode and introduce you all to our guest. So today we are speaking with Ellen Ruppel Shell, a professor emeritus at Boston University in the Department of Science Journalism. Ellen has published many articles, reviews, and essays which have appeared in the New York Times, The Guardian, LA Times, Washington Post, and she spent years as a contributing editor and correspondent for The Atlantic. Ellen is the author of 5 books, including the one we are featuring today, titled Slippery Beasts, A True Crime Natural History with Eels. Uh-huh. Now you see what we're talking about earlier.
Yeah.
You're getting it now.
Hmm.
We are talking all about eels today. But hold on, don't think you know this animal unless you
We
really
have no
do.
idea. We have
Mm-hmm.
no idea.
No idea. And boy, are they full of surprises. Um, so in Ellen's book, Slippery Beast, she takes us on a journey that is as surprising as the animal itself. We go from Freud and his short-lived quest to understanding the species to the dark underworld of the largest illegally traded species today. Eels are the most heavily trafficked animal in the world.
Hmm.
So, first news flash, did not know that. Wow. That's more than rhino horn, elephant tusk, pangolin
Right.
scales,
Yeah,
turtles.
exactly.
Crazy,
Uh-huh.
right? Well, wait
Yeah.
till you hear more. Um, that one really did blow my mind, though.
Hmm.
Um, so yes, and I'll just remind our listeners that this is a book club episode, so we are not doing a takeaway. The takeaway is for you to buy the book and let us know what you think. Are you now fans of this slippery beast? Email us at info@kindredpodcast.co and let us know for sure. So thanks so much to Ellen for this fantastic conversation, walking us through the astonishing world of eels and all those that fall under their spell. Be prepared to be surprised and change your mind on eels if you've even thought about them before, other than eating them maybe sometimes. So here we go. All right, sister,
Here we go.
are you ready to jump in with some eels? Let's be
Total.
brave.
Oh, jump
Let's be
in with
brave.
them. Okay. Metaphorically, yes.
Totally worth it. Listen, even the Egyptians thought so. All right,
That's
thanks
right.
so much, everyone, for listening. We'll see you next time, next episode. Lots of love. Ellen, welcome to Kindred and welcome to our Kindred Book Club. We are thrilled to have you here and add your latest book to our distinguished list of book club members. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's going to be a lot of fun, I'm sure.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, with this topic, absolutely. If you would, please introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Well, I'm Ellen Ruppel Shell. That's my full name. I'm professor emeritus, Boston University, where I co-ran the graduate program in science journalism for many years. I'm also obviously a writer. I've written 5 books, this being my latest. And I also was for years, a correspondent for The Atlantic, and write for the Smithsonian, the New York Times, a bunch of other places. So a writer and teacher of writers.
Amazing. Wow, that's
Hmm.
quite a resume you have. Very, very impressive. Well, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. We are so pleased to share with our listeners your latest book titled Slippery Beast, A True Crime Natural History with Eels. And you aren't kidding. I mean, you take us through the wild world of eels, including a deep dive into the science and mystery that surrounds eels and into the dark corners of the eel fishing and illegal trade industry. It's a really fascinating read. So thank you for sharing this with us today. Now, Ellen, I am always so curious when we talk to people for our book club. What was the hook that compelled you to write an entire book about eels? You don't just sit down one day and a month later produce a manuscript that's nearly 300 pages long. This is a months/years long effort involving travel and research and interviews. So why eels?
Yeah, you're right about it being years, not months.
Hmm.
Um, I didn't really find eels. The eels found me.
Ah,
And there's a story behind that if you want it. I'd be happy to share it.
please.
I want it.
You
Yeah,
Yes.
want to know it? Okay.
I
Well,
do.
I'm not really an eel person. My last two books were actually on politics and economics. So this was kind of a
Quite a
change for
departure.
me,
Yeah,
Right.
quite a
right.
departure. And when I was working on my previous book, uh, well, let me start by saying that I live about half the year in the state of Maine,
Ah,
Mm.
half the year in the Boston area, and half the year in Maine on the coast. And
mm,
anyone who's spent a winter in Maine knows that they can be pretty rough.
That's
right.
where you spend the winter there?
Oh yeah,
I
sometimes
was
I do.
wondering. Wow, that's
Yeah.
even colder than Boston. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it does. It can get pretty chilly and it can get
Hmm.
pretty wet and it can
Yeah.
get frozen. And so,
Hmm.
what that does to your house, you can imagine.
Yes.
Hmm.
And so, our house, my husband and I have a place in on the coast, and it got pretty beat up. And
Mm,
it was beyond us to fix just by ourselves. So we hired a guy. But in the book, I call him Sam. It's not his real name, and you'll find out why soon.
mhm.
I don't use his real name. The lawyers wouldn't let me.
Right.
Uh,
Mm.
but uh, but Sam was a handyman. He called himself a handyman, a kind of jack of all trades. He said he was a wonder with power tools. But after he started to work for us, it became pretty clear if he was ever a wonder, that wonder ceased with us
Come here.
Yeah.
because
No.
Oh
he
no.
I hate
he
when that happens.
right
Same.
he used to kind of skip miss days and
Oh,
come
that's a
late
wonder.
and
Mm.
Oh
quit
no.
early. And sometimes he would just shuffle into the kitchen, especially when my husband was out of town. He would shuffle in the kitchen and sit at my kitchen table, bringing along a 4 pack of cider,
Oh
Oh,
which
boy.
he loved, and
okay.
tell me stories. And I got to tell you, I'm a sucker for stories.
I
Yeah.
bet.
So I ended up being, paying this guy for him to tell me a lot of stories.
Okay. Well,
And it sounds
all
weird,
roads
but
lead to right.
exactly, it kind of paid off
Okay,
because
very good.
one day he was telling me his stories, complaining about the women in his life, and we won't get into that. But there was one person he really liked, and that was his grandson, his 8-year-old grandson.
Mm,
And he told me he taught his grandson how to play t-ball. He taught him how to play horseshoes. He was an expert horseshoe player. But most of all, he wanted to teach him how to fish.
right.
But to do that, he'd have to buy a boat. And that's why he was working for us and for other people as a handyman because he
Ah.
was trying to put the money together to buy a boat. And I said,
Uh-huh.
Sam, you know what? It doesn't seem like you're thrilled with this handyman stuff. Why don't you get yourself a commercial fishing license and mix
Right.
business with pleasure?
Right.
And he said, you know, I did do that and I would do that, but
Mm.
not anymore because of the eels.
Oh,
Mm.
Okay, now if
okay.
that isn't
And
going to
so it
stop you,
begins. Okay. All
so
right.
it
Yes.
Yeah.
begins. So I
And your
said to him,
researcher writer was like, "Hello, new
right.
subject."
What
Right.
is this? So I said, what are you talking about? The eels don't, do they bite or
Right.
whatever? And he said, well, eels don't bite as far as I know, but I don't care about grown eels. It's the baby eels I'm talking about. And
Uh-huh. The
ever
plot
since the
thickens.
price of those baby eels that they call elvers or glass eels, ever since the price of those went through the roof, it's gotten really dangerous down by the river.
Oh,
And I
wow.
said, what do you mean the price of baby eels has gone through the roof? We live in Maine. It's lobster
Right.
is king, and lobster's going for what, about $7 or $8 a pound down on the
Right.
wharf. He
Mm-hmm.
goes, oh, $7 or $8 a pound? Elvers, baby eels are selling for as much as $3,000 a pound.
Yeah, holy
Baby
smokes.
eels. So
Wow.
this was a dozen years ago. I'd never heard of this. I was completely flabbergasted by this.
Yeah, wow.
And as I said, I was finishing up another book, and then I had another project and teaching. All this stuff got in the way. It was probably almost 10 years by the time I got to this subject of eels. And what I found out was, well, Sam kind of used to tell a lot of tall tales.
Right.
What he had told me about eels was, just the beginning of the story, and
Oh,
he kind
wow.
Right.
of opened up this treasure trove of history, natural history, and crime
Yeah.
that turned into this book. So I actually, Sam was not a good handyman, but he did me a great favor. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and little did you know that was just the tip of the iceberg. And
Oh
like a
yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
people you represent in the book, eels found you. I mean, it's an interesting story how eels find people. So
That is true.
let's crack open your book and break into a few of the major spaces you cover in the world of eels. You take us through a journey in this book, starting from the ancient days of Egypt, when humans would keep eels as pets and adorn them with gold jewelry. Just let that set in.
That's
To
very strange. That's
mhm,
very strange.
to
A
a
pet
modern
eel.
right to a modern day kingpin on the coast of Maine and the
Mhm.
dark underbelly of a criminal world that is the stuff of New York Times best-selling crime novels. I'm not even kidding. I recently read The Edge by David Baldacci, which is set in Maine and touches on the illegal eel trade. So let's start with how the eel became such a highly lucrative creature, one people are willing to go to prison for. So, how does an animal like the eel end up at the center of a book with true crime in the title?
Well, you're right about the kingpin. William Sheldon is his name, and that is his real name, and I can say that because I met him very shortly after he got out of federal prison
Mm.
for participating, actually heading up. He's the kingpin of a crime ring of over 100 folks who were up and down the East Coast poaching eels, smuggling eels. It was a 5-year investigation involving several federal agencies that busted up this crime ring. And
Wow.
what I should begin by telling you is what really stunned me was the illicit trade in baby eels is the most lucrative wildlife crime in the world.
And tell
Wow.
us, tell us
Yeah.
why. Why in the heck do people like this is what I'm sure people are going to wonder is why, what? What is it about baby eels?
Okay,
Exactly.
okay. I think that's a
What?
very important question, and you can tell I'm
That's just
hedging it just a little bit because
okay. Well,
there's
you're a
there's
storyteller, so you might need to weave the web a little bit more, if
there
that's
you
Yes,
okay.
go.
there's a
There
web.
there's a web.
Okay.
God, the web of eel, the eel web is something
Yeah.
really. So baby eels, and humans have eaten eels, as you mentioned, for pretty much forever, and they used to be one of the most ubiquitous creatures, water creatures on Earth.
Hmm.
They were, so it's, eating eels was popular going back to before Aristotle's time. This is, believe it or not, it was a very, very popular food in the world
Hmm.
because it was so common. Now, there are 820 varieties, species of eels, okay? So the kind of eels I'm talking about are the freshwater eels,
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
predominantly the Japanese eel, the European eel, and the most, important for my book, the American eel, okay?
Right.
So those are
So
the ones
not
that are,
in the ocean, not those, because I think eels are very
well,
scary, actually, the ones I have seen, and I wouldn't want to
Well,
come anywhere near them. Yeah.
sure.
well, the eels do spend part of their life in the ocean. They breed in the ocean. Okay.
Okay.
They're freshwater eels because they live their lives in fresh water. And we'll get to that. They have quite a
Yeah.
circuitous life cycle. It's crazy, by the way.
Yes.
So you're
Yes.
asking, what is it about eels that makes them so valuable? Well, what made them so valuable is that they're, as I said, a very, very popular food, especially in Japan, where 70% of eels are consumed. But
Okay.
the Japanese eel went in sharp decline, is highly endangered. Okay, and that happened around 2010 when it really got endangered. The European eel, the Europeans also love eel. Okay, the European eel is critically endangered. Okay, it is illegal to export the European eel out of the
Mm.
EU. It's illegal now. Okay, so that leaves the American eel. That's the eel, the commercially viable eel that's still available for this
Okay.
huge international market.
Gotcha.
Right.
And remember, what I'm talking about here are baby eels.
Hmm.
Grown eels are not valuable at all. Okay, we
So
don't really
we
eat.
don't eat the adult eels. Okay.
Very, very rare to eat a wild adult eel unless you've
Okay.
caught it yourself or you know someone who has caught it. It's very unlikely. These are all cultivated eels. They're grown up on farms, on eel
Okay.
farms,
Hmm.
mostly in China. So
Mm.
the eels caught off the coast of Maine, the only legal baby eel fishery of any size in the United States is Maine. Okay,
Right.
Oh
there's
They're
a
the
wow.
tiny,
biggest eel producer in the US, correct?
well, there's South Carolina has a tiny fishery with only 10 licenses. It's really insignificant.
Okay.
So
Mm.
Maine is really the only significant fishery for baby eels in the United States.
Right.
There are about 425 eel fishers licenses in the state of Maine for state fishermen. There's another licensing system for Native American fishermen. But in any case,
Hmm.
it's less than 10,000 pounds a year of baby eels are legally harvested off the coast of Maine. So a pound of eels is a lot of eel. A pound of baby eels is a lot of eels.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay,
That's all because
it's a lot of
they're
eels.
elvers and they're tiny. So a
Tiny. They're
pound is a
tiny.
lot of them.
It's a lot of them. And
Yeah.
Hmm.
so when they're caught off the coast of Maine and then they're shipped to China to be grown up on there are 1,000 different eel farms in China, in southern China.
Wow.
They're grown up there to market size. It takes anywhere from 9 months to 2 years. Market size varies, but for example, for sushi, the market size is about a pound. And then they're
So that
shipped
takes a while.
back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It takes
They're shipped back
they're
to Maine.
shipped back
Yep.
to the United States. So what you're eating when you eat eel in a Japanese restaurant in the United States is most likely American eel that's been raised in China.
It's
Hmm.
Okay, and
bananas.
shipped back. It's a
It is bananas.
crazy, crazy supply chain. It's
Yeah.
Yes.
crazy, and and that as a result, that's the reason you get about $2,500 for a
Gotcha.
pound of these baby eels, which, as I said, is the most lucrative wildlife crime in the world. And that stunned me
Mm.
because I've
Yeah.
Yeah.
heard, I
It's
think
stunning.
about,
It is
right,
stunning. You think of like
elephant
right,
tusks,
tusk and
Right,
rhino
exactly. Or
horn and
rhinoceros or yeah,
or
or like right.
rhinoceros or
All those
tiger
other
seal.
things that
paws
Hmm.
or
right, exactly.
yeah,
All the
yeah,
that's
yeah,
what I was thinking, all
yeah,
the
Stunning.
yeah,
illegal things from for medicinal reasons and stuff. But
Yeah.
I guess part of it
right.
is if you've got to ship them to China and then
Yeah,
back from China, that's a
yeah.
pretty costly
It's
endeavor.
costly, and much of the value is caught by the Chinese, right? Not by the main
Mm.
fishermen. So
Yeah,
Right.
this
Right.
yeah,
is a problem that
yeah,
we need to consider about that supply chain.
yeah.
And I talk in the book about the first commercially viable eel farm in the United States that was, built in Maine by a woman by the name of Sarah Rademacher, and she built it. It cost her over $10 million to
Wow.
build in a office park, a business park,
So
Wow.
amazing. Wow.
again in Maine and Waldoboro, Maine, and she's got she's doing well. It's the first real commercially viable eel farm in the U.S. where they
Wow.
instead of sending those baby eels to China, a small number of fishers can sell them to Sarah, and
Yeah.
Hmm.
she grows them up.
Wow.
So, but again, it's a first step in that direction.
And
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
anytime there's that kind of like money at
Hmm.
play, there's always going to be corruption around it,
Yep.
right?
oh
Yep.
It's just
yes,
guaranteed, right?
Well,
Yeah. So,
and
absolutely,
even this kingpin
absolutely.
that we were, Ellen, what's his name again? The kingpin
William Sheldon.
he started as a fisherman and then he didn't end. This is not where he started. He didn't start
yeah.
like,
No,
oh, I heard about eels in my 20s and has been doing this his
no.
career life. And finally, he started was he in conservation?
Yes, he has a degree in wildlife management, and
Yes.
he got his
So
start,
shocking.
over 50 years ago, working for the state. And just by coincidence, there was a problem in Japan with the eel already then. It was 50 years ago, and an attaché in the Japanese embassy called, the state of Maine and said, "Do you guys have baby eels? Because we're running low here." And so Bill Sheldon was a young man at the time, his early 20s, and he was charged with figuring out how many baby eels there were in Maine and whether there could be a viable fishery for baby eels in Maine that maybe could be shipped to Japan. So he got his start, like I said, many, many years ago. He's an expert on eels. He also designed one of the, a special trap to catch eels. He's very, very knowledgeable about
Yeah.
eels. But as it turns out, what I found out in the course of researching this book is people who participate in wildlife crimes often do know a lot about the animal they're
Yeah.
Yeah.
trafficking in,
Yeah.
okay? Because
That
to
which
Yeah.
keep it
makes sense.
alive, right,
Yes.
Because
it's
you can make
hard.
more money if you know more. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Right.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
keeping baby eels alive is not easy, right?
Especially on a trip that long, I'm sure. Yeah.
Well,
Exactly. So
yeah.
he's very knowledgeable, and I grant him that. As I said, I spent some time with him. He was not happy to talk to me. I think I was probably the last journalist he spoke with, but we spoke
Mm.
for hours. I
Yeah.
went to his house. Um, and one of the things he was angry about me with, at the time I was just starting the book, I didn't know enough about eels.
Oh, right.
Mm.
Interesting.
I
Hmm.
hadn't read enough of, scientific papers and things like that. Now, since then, of course, I have. But
Yes.
he took it very, very seriously. So even though he was in the state penitentiary
Yeah.
for
Right.
six
Yeah.
months for trafficking in eels and breaking the law, he still felt a sort of stewardship about the eel. So he was a
That's
very interesting
fascinating.
character.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Really
he was very
interesting
interesting.
character. And I
Yeah.
think, and like you mentioned, eels are extremely hard to raise, I'll say, like in a farm or in captivity type thing. And so I think this is a really good time to switch perspectives a little bit and talk about and focus now on eels in context to science and dig into why they are such an alluring species that although they seem to be a very uncharismatic creature, they are the stuff of myth and mystery, and scientists seem to be no less charmed by them, like this gentleman. In your book, you cover many scientists who have searched throughout history to solve the many mysteries of the eels, reproduction, morphology, migration, behavior. So introduce us to this species by telling us what sets them apart from other fish and why we are so captivated by eels.
Okay, well, eels are, I call them contrarians. They don't do what you think they should do, right? And this has fascinated naturalists and scientists since Aristotle. And Aristotle was fascinated by eels. And why is Aristotle so important when we think of eels? Well, Aristotle believed that eels generated spontaneously. That is, they did not sexually reproduce,
Mm.
but they kind of sprouted right out of the mud, right out of the riverbank. And the reason that he thought that was a very good reason that no one had ever seen eels spawn. No one
Right.
had
Mm.
ever seen an eel egg, and no one had ever seen an eel in the open ocean. Okay, a mature eel in the open ocean. By the way, that was over 3,000 years ago, and it's still true today.
Yeah,
No
Wow.
this
one,
is crazy.
right? It's crazy. So you don't see eels in the open ocean,
Yeah.
and you don't see eel eggs. And a lot of the theory about where eels reproduce and how they reproduce is just that. It's theory. We
Yeah.
don't have absolute proof of this being true, although we're a lot closer than we were in Aristotle's time. So what's so fascinating to me as someone who, is a science journalist is that the kind of history of science kind of parallels the history of what we know about eels.
Mm,
Mm.
So in Aristotle time, he had this theory of spontaneous generation. This was a very important theory. That is, that life could come from non-life. Okay.
right.
Not only Aristotle, thinkers throughout history up until the mid 1800s actually believed this, that
Yeah.
that things would just sprout unbidden from mud or
Right.
rocks or
Right.
stuff like that. Very, very smart people thought that.
Mhm.
And the reason that the eel was so many agreed upon this with the eel. In fact, the eel was an example that was also often pulled out of spontaneous generation is because, as I said before, the eel was so ubiquitous.
Yeah.
There were so many eels,
Right.
and no one saw them
Ever saw them?
reproducing.
Yeah.
No one
Some
Mm.
saw them
people
anywhere
lied about
doing
it.
this, not people like
No, no,
explorers and navigators and
exactly,
scientists. And they're like, I
exactly.
get why they're like, well, they just come out of the mud.
That's right. Now, look, so even I talk in the book about Sigmund Freud,
Yes, you
right? So
do.
we're
Oh my gosh.
fast
His
forward
one board
into
summer.
exactly. He was one summer, so it was actually summer into fall, but that's right. Sigmund Freud was a medical student in mid to late 1800s, his boss said to him, "Look, I want you to find the male sexual organ of the eel."
Right.
What an assignment. And so he
Yeah.
sent him to a coastal town in Italy, Trieste, and where there was a harbor. And what poor Sigmund Freud, he was a 20-year-old medical student at the time, had to do was like put on this apron and sit at this table
Ugh.
and disembowel eel after eel after eel looking for the male sexual organ, because at the time they weren't sure that there was a male sex,
Right.
a male
Right.
eel, right?
Right.
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 They found the sexual organ in females, but they had not found it. It turned out that he was barking up the wrong tree for a long time because he was opening up large eels. Male eels tend to be smaller. Okay. So
Mm.
finally, when he figured it out, and Darwin had actually said this, that in many species of fish, and eel is a fish, the male is smaller than the female. Okay.
Right.
So
So he's
this is
like,
what
well,
we call,
no, males are always
yeah,
bigger and better. So we have to get the bigger ones because, of course, I mean, this is
exactly.
women. I mean, we're all rolling our eyes. I mean, reading this book, like,
Right.
yeah, okay.
Right.
Heard that before.
That's exactly right. And
Yes.
so, on average, the male eel is much smaller than the female eel, much younger too. They die younger. They're smaller. So when he finally figured it out after many weeks that maybe he should stick with the smaller eels, he finally found a tiny, tiny testy
Right.
in a male eel, therefore proving that there are male eels. But however, he published this paper, was Freud's first um, scientific publication.
Amazing.
Amazing. And then he
Wow.
ran like hell away from the topic because his advisor had not wanted him to find a male eel. He thought the eels were hermaphrodites, that they would have both male
Oh.
and female organs,
Uh,
and he only found a male organ in this eel. So he ran as far as he could away from the eel after that. And if you read his letters, they're hysterical. I mean,
hmm
he's like I said, a 20-year-old kid. He's doing this. He really felt he was above doing
Oh
this
right.
yeah,
I'm sure. Yeah.
he was like, I'm sorry, I've just gutted 800 eels. I am so out
Yeah,
of here. This
he
place is
was.
the worst.
This is
It
not
was
for
very
me. Yeah.
funny.
Right.
hmm
Exactly. And he
But it
went to
is so
humans,
funny that
right?
this is Freud we're talking about. We know all the implications
Yeah.
of
That's
Freud, and he's like,
crazy.
go
Yeah.
find the penis, and I can't find it, and it's an ovary, and oh, there's a tiny testy, and it's just like, and again, as we're going to learn as we talk, you know, these eels reach maturity at different times. Males reach them at a different time than a female, so faster. So it's like the females are bigger, they take longer. The males are smaller, they take a
Right.
shorter amount of time, and they're neither male or female at birth, correct?
Right. That's
Right.
right. They're not. And so the environment influences whether they become male and female. And
That's
when they've only
incredible.
recently discovered that most of the eels, many eels, we call them, they're freshwater fish, right? They're
Right.
freshwater. But male eels are much more likely not to go up the rivers. So
Mm.
they sometimes just hang out in estuaries. They won't necessarily go into the rivers. Like if you go and into the lake, so like Lake Ontario, which used to be filled with eels, not anymore.
Uh,
It was mostly female eels, and the
mm.
female eels will hang out and can live for as long as 40 to 50 years.
Oh
Right.
gosh. Wow.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
there's even
and
in
yeah,
captive eels have been, I think, and this by the way, I'm getting completely from your book that you talked
yeah,
about an eel, a female that was well into her hundreds, or like 100. They think. I mean, these animals can live
yes,
an
yes,
extremely long time, also. And
yes,
we'll get into this more later. But just that, where they live. So they're in the ocean, and then they come
right,
out of the ocean or do like American eels, like Maine's eels, are they
Right.
born quote unquote out in the ocean? They come back and they go through like streams and estuaries and then they end up in freshwater. Like, is there ones in my stream out here, my river, or
Yeah, it's quite
okay,
likely that
okay,
there are eels in your stream. But let me explain a little bit. So,
okay.
it is thought that the American eel breeds in the Sargasso Sea. Okay, the Sargasso Sea, another really weird place. I mean, I went there. It's south of Bermuda, is where they think that eels breed.
Oh,
Okay.
Bermuda is the only landmass in the Sargasso Sea, um, and which is again very, very weird because it's the only sea in the world that's bordered by currents and not by land masses. So the
Interesting.
Sargasso is a weird place.
mm,
And I met with some scientists there who were about to go off for a month-long excursion looking for eel larva. Okay,
Aha.
that's the baby eel, the
Yes,
larva.
yes,
That's
yes.
the second stage after you get the fertilized egg is the
Right.
larva.
So at least can
And
they find larva? Because no one's found anything before that. So
right, they want to find the smallest possible larva because if you get they haven't found any eggs and they haven't
right,
found any sperm, right? So
right.
crazy.
they're hoping they're going to find the birthplace of the eel. As it turned out, it was a German team. They had gone out many times looking. It's a huge expedition. They still haven't found the larva down in the small larva down in the Sargasso Sea. But the thinking is since about 1935, whereas another guy, Johannes Smith, who was a from Copenhagen,
Mm-hmm.
he was a scientist who devoted his life really to searching for the breeding grounds of the European and the American eel. He's the first one that really traced it to the Sargasso Sea. But again, we're not sure where in the Sargasso Sea or if it's the only place, but it's thought to be. Okay. So they
Right.
breed down there. And how does that work? So you have the egg and the sperm get together. They grow into a larva, and then they catch some of these currents. The Gulf, in the case of the American eel, it's the Gulf Stream,
Right. Right.
and they both catch that current, and they also propel themselves. It's recently been proved that they also propel
Okay.
themselves,
Oh,
Okay.
interesting.
and they have a horizontal migration, but also vertical because they go up at night and they come down during the day. So they go up to the surface at
Wow.
night
Wow.
to feed and then have to hide at night.
Okay.
So the amount of energy used for this is insane.
Right.
Okay. So it takes about a year to
Wow.
get to the main coast from the Sargasso Sea on these currents. So it takes about a
Right.
year.
Uh-huh.
And as they approach the continent, the American continent, North American continent, they change from larva to a glass eel, which is like a cylindrical.
Got it.
So the larva looks almost like a little oak leaf, and and it's transparent. Then the glass eel looks more eel-like, and
Okay.
it is also transparent. And then
Right.
as it approaches the coast, as it gets in further, it becomes an alver. It gets some pigmentation,
Yeah. Is that the
and
same as a yellow
yeah.
eel when they could turn a
No,
little yellow? That's
no,
later. Okay.
no, that is later.
That's later.
And
Oh my
so
gosh. They have like, don't they have like
yeah,
five
they have
phases of
five
life? Yes, it's
five
crazy.
phases of life.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they get to the coast, a certain number of them, we don't know how many, continue up into the rivers and
Mm.
they swim as far as the Mississippi and into the
Wow.
Midwest, and they
Wow.
pretty much infest, lakes and rivers all along the way. So there are
Okay.
eels all over the place.
Okay.
Now,
And these are
fewer than
males
there
and
used to be.
females, right?
Yes, but the
Okay.
further you get and the longer they stay, the more likely
The
they
more
are to
female.
turn into females. They're
Yes.
not male or female yet.
Okay. Okay.
Their environment pretty much determines their
So
gender, their
bananas. Right.
sex.
Right. Right.
Okay, so
Incredible.
when an eel is in a big wide open space like a lake or a
Yeah.
pond, it's much more likely to be female.
Aha.
If it's
Ah.
crowded, it's more likely to be a male.
Okay.
Okay. So that's part of the challenge of farming eels. If they're crowded, they're more likely to be male and they grow more slowly.
Mm,
Okay.
Right.
Unless you give them
Interesting.
hormones.
Right,
Oh,
which
right.
wow.
is illegal in the United States.
Yeah.
And then once
So,
they get to these
yeah.
places, they're hanging out, I mean, an indiscriminate amount of time. It can be 3 years or it can be like 40 years. Like
Oh,
females can just
yeah.
hang out.
Yeah.
And I
They
mean,
hang out.
living there,
Yeah.
doing their things, eating, growing, becoming what
Yeah.
they are.
Yeah.
Before
Yeah.
then, they
Yeah.
migrate back to where we think they were, quote unquote, born, which
Right.
is
So, right.
bananas.
Yeah, so what you said, the yellow eel. So when it gets into a pond or a lake or well into a river, that's when it becomes the yellow eel. That's the next
Okay.
stage. And it is kind of a yellowish color, and its only job is to eat. That's
Right.
all
Hmm.
it does.
They are
And
hungry little
they
eaters.
eat, they're omnivores. They eat, they're both prey and predator.
They turn into
They're
goats. They eat everything
they
that's in front of them. It's
they
the
eat
goat
everything that's
phase, we'll call
smaller,
it.
exactly. Anything that's smaller than themselves, pretty much.
Yeah.
They
Mm.
eat, and that's pretty much what they do. And they grow, they can grow quite large,
Yeah.
these female eels.
Wow.
Now I should say to Jen, who mentioned that she's scared of them, I was scared of them,
Hmm.
Mm.
very scared of them. That was stupid.
Boy,
It
we've
usually is
covered that
stupid.
on the
Our
podcast
fear,
before.
our fear is usually out of ignorance, right? Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
well,
we are
sometimes
stupid.
if you're scared of sharks, you should be scared of sharks, but
Yeah.
A lot of
some
that's still
sharks,
stupid though, too.
that's
So,
true. Not all sharks, but
uh,
the American eel, I couldn't really find any case of any serious harm done to humans by,
Yeah.
and I looked because believe me, I didn't want to get near those things.
Yeah.
yeah.
And I was in France talking to an eel scientist who felt the same way when she first, and was a woman, and it was scared of snakes, just like me, very scared of
Mm,
snakes. And she fell in love with the eel. She had no intention of
right.
studying eels, but she got a grant to do it.
Oh,
And so she did it and she fell in love with them. And now she goes
Hmm.
and seeks them out and actually swims with eels whenever she
oh,
Wow.
can, using a
friends,
GoPro camera so she
eel
can,
friends. Hmm.
yeah, they're like puppy dogs.
Well, I
Well,
think
and it
once you
Really
definitely
are.
helps.
understand them,
They
you
It
aren't
are.
helps
scared of
just to know
them.
that they're not snakes of the water, because water snakes
Yeah.
Right.
water
Right.
snakes
No.
to me are about the creepiest thing that
That's a good thing to say. They are
exists.
not the
They're
water.
fish.
They're not.
They're
Yes,
They're
they're
fish.
not.
Yeah.
absolutely fish.
That
Yep,
They're
helps
not.
just
exactly. It
knowing
is
that.
helpful.
Yeah.
Yes, they aren't
They
Hmm.
are fish.
snake fish.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you thought they weren't fish, you're not alone. I mean, that was
Yeah.
Yeah,
actually
Yeah.
proven
That's news.
relatively recently,
right,
Yeah.
right.
okay? Because there were all different kinds of theories about what eels are, and
Hmm.
they are fish, okay? And
Now,
yeah,
so here we are in a bog or a stream or a lake or whatever, and we're like, I'm seized to return. So talk to us about their migration back, which is to me astonishing, and how they think they do this.
right. Well, the person, and I actually acknowledge this in the book, who wrote beautifully about this was Rachel Carson.
Okay.
Girl,
Yeah.
love
We
this
know her.
woman. We're
Yeah.
gonna do a whole
Rachel
Yeah.
episode on her. It's
Carson.
coming.
Oh, great, because Carson was wonderful. Also lived
Yeah.
not too far from my place on the coast of Maine.
Mm.
Right.
And she wrote beautifully about this eel's migration. So anyone who it would like detail might be interested in reading Rachel Carson's version of it. But my version of it is probably less poetic than hers. But it's basically they do get seized, as you said, they get seized. We don't know why, with this idea of going back. So the yellow eel has reached a point when it's decided that it's time to go back to
Mm.
spawn. And it goes back. We don't know why. We don't know why. It could be 40 years. It could be 10 years. It could be 5
Right.
years.
We don't
We
know the
don't know what
trigger.
makes them.
Yeah.
We don't know the trigger. It varies from eel to eel. And it goes back down the river to the estuary, down the coast, and back into the ocean. And want to make that stage is called the silver eel stage. It's the final stage. And it never eats again. It does
Mm.
not eat. So
Oh
it
my
goes all the
gosh.
way, in the case of the
In its
American
whole
eel,
life,
in his whole life.
dies
So it
hungry.
could be
This
as
is
far
terrible.
north, the American eel could be as far north as Greenland when it starts this journey. And then it
And
goes
that
Wow.
could
all the
take
way
quite a
back.
while.
Yes,
Wow.
How
it
long
can take a
does it
year and
take?
a half, a year
Oh,
and a
Wow.
half. And so it lives on
this is
its own
crazy.
body. It
Wow.
eats
Oh.
itself, including
Oh.
its own bones. It eats itself
Oh.
all the way back to the Sargasso Sea, where it finally, you can imagine it's a husk, we assume. We haven't
Right.
seen them.
Right.
It's a husk when it gets back there, and all it can
Wow.
do is breed once, or some people think twice, and
Okay.
then die. And that's it.
Wow. And I
That's
Which
think
it.
I
we
don't,
Yeah.
that doesn't make sense to me as thinking about how life is. Like a
right.
human, when you are breeding, you have to have more resources than
Right.
fewer in order to produce something. How the heck do they do that when they're basically half dead?
Great
That's so
That's right.
question.
bizarre.
It's their last act on this earth.
Wow.
Wow.
That's
And
it.
that takes
You
it
know, the
all
one
out
thing
of
I'll
them.
say, it
Yeah.
does remind me a little bit about an octopus mom who, when she lays her eggs, she sits there for up to 4 years, does not eat. She also kind of disintegrates. Octopuses do a similar-ish to me kind of thing in the way that
Well,
they
right.
don't eat again, and then babies are born and eat her probably or something. I'm forgetting. But so okay, so they're on
Yeah, and
their
here we have
way.
to give a nod to my pal Cy Montgomery,
Ty
who wrote a
Yes,
whole
Montgomery,
that's
book on
right.
yes.
this.
Shout
Cy,
out
we
to
love her
Cy.
too. Yeah.
So I wouldn't venture into octopi, but I'll stand by the eel.
Yes,
That
let's
one
stick
I
with eels today.
we do know that absolutely. But you're right. They're
That's
not the only
very,
creature who
very,
does it.
very
Yeah,
interesting. Huh.
So
yeah.
then they get to where, do they think that she drops her eggs and he drops the sperm and it just sort of floats around together? And this is how, because if they're husks, they're not actually like having some kind of connection, uh, a mating ceremony. I wouldn't think.
Right.
Okay.
That's what is thought. Again, they've never been bred in captivity. You can't breed the American eel in
Oh, it's
captivity.
so
Okay, it's
fascinating.
been tried, and it was tried in Dartmouth, Mass, the University of Massachusetts at Dartmouth. There was a scientist who was able, using a lot of hormones,
Yeah,
to kind of induce, a breeding, situation,
Hmm.
right.
some eels, but those larvae did not survive.
Interesting.
Okay.
Interesting.
So
That
even
is
though he was able to do
fascinating.
it, and he was
Right.
never able to get, I asked him if he was able to do it again. He wasn't able to get the research funding to repeat the experiment.
Mm.
Ah,
But it was really tons of work. But by the way, this is the holy grail for Japanese scientists. They have been
I
working on it
bet
mm,
they are
probably.
trying very hard to make
They've
that work.
spent,
Yeah.
I heard anywhere from millions to billions of dollars
I kind
trying. I
of
don't know
like
what's
that they
true.
can't do it. I
They
kind
I
of
can't
like
just
do
that.
it.
think, can there
They
I kind
be
of
can't.
like
one
that.
species that gives us the
Yeah,
fingers?
Like,
Like,
sorry. Yeah,
no,
sorry. No, thank
no,
you. You
totally.
can't
ma'am.
manipulate
No,
us
sir.
that much. Yeah, I like
Totally.
that.
They've
Hmm.
gotten closer in Japan, but they with
Wow.
the Japanese eel, but they still have it's not commercially viable.
Hmm.
The resources involved are crazy, and
Yeah.
so we're nowhere near there with the American eel. We
That's
cannot
amazing.
breed it in captivity.
So
Yeah.
before we move on, I do want to just mention though, there has been some research because part of the fascination to me also is this whole swimming and going up and down. They think they're eating, but also it's like they're wondering if there's some magnetic sort of pull that they're used because how do they navigate? I mean, is it memory? I don't know. I mean, the GPS in these creatures of the
I
ocean
was
is
wondering that too.
incredible. But
Yeah, how they get back. Yeah.
yeah, is
Right.
that a theory that has been kind of held on to?
Yeah, so that's actually very recent work, and I went to
Okay.
Norway to look at this
Oh.
because the premier scientist working on this is Caroline de Roff, who's actually French, but she works
Hmm.
in Norway, off Bergen, which
Okay.
is a
Oh
town
yeah,
in Norway,
I've been
and
there. Uh-huh.
an island off the coast. So she and I went to this island together.
Yeah.
She's wonderfully generous. And she showed me her laboratory, which is what they call the Mag Lab, a
Ah,
magnetic
uh-huh.
laboratory.
Okay.
And she and her team have pretty much established that the eel does follow a magnetic field and it
Okay.
has the ability to find. They haven't found the organ on the eel that
Of course
responds to
not.
the magnetic
Hmm.
field,
Where's
but
Freud?
they've exactly, but they have shown using in the mag lab, they've shown that they do use their magnetic sense to navigate. There's
Wow.
also it's possible that there's some lunar involvement, the moon. I
Mm.
mean, this is all very magical stuff. It's
Yeah,
almost like
right.
it almost sounds like a fairy tale
Yeah.
that they
Yes.
navigate by their
Yeah.
magnetic sense. And in the case of the European eel, which also breeds in the Sargasso Sea, their journey is even longer. It can take
Oh,
because
good grief.
they go up with the Gulf Stream and then keep going around. Okay, it can take up to 3 years for
Oh,
the European
thank
eel
you for not
to
making me an
right,
eel. I complain about
right,
going to Whole
yeah.
Foods in at 4 p.m. and this is like, I mean,
Yeah,
come
yeah.
on.
They're pretty determined. I mean, what's so
Wow.
Wow.
wonderful about this eel is that
Yeah.
not only is the eel such a mysterious and determined creature, but the people who study it are equally determined and fascinated by
Yeah.
this mystery and curious and
And
they're
flabbergasted.
flabbergasted. And this is not the stuff of fame and fortune, right? They do
No,
this because of
certainly not fortune. Mhm.
right, their love of nature and their curiosity, right?
Well, and I want to move on to dig into eel conservation and challenges the eels are facing because some of this stuff is just even more fascinating to me. So I'll say here that from your book again, you talk about how conservationists slash environmentalists and fishermen are not on the same page. The former say we're possibly driving them to extinction, and fishermen say there are plenty of them. But what we do know is that on top of everything else, the eel is an indicator species, which means they indicate the health of an ecosystem. So there are other indicators, lots of other ones, like example, butterflies, mayflies, lichen, salmon, which a lot of people know, river otters, and just to name
Mhm.
a few.
Yeah.
So, because eels are so sensitive to their environment, we can tell the health of our waterways by the health and numbers of eels operating within them. So, how are things like warming ocean water, pollution, dams, and even potential viruses impacting eels today?
Yeah, well, you pretty much said it. Everything, turbines, hydroelectric turbines, have
Hmm.
been an incredible threat to eels. They chop them up into pieces, and
Oh yeah.
if you're interested in watching this, which maybe not all of us are, there are many
Mm.
videos of this on YouTube of eels being chopped up by hydroelectric, these turbines.
So,
Okay.
this is
Um,
where I'm either coming in from the ocean or I'm leaving my home on my migration back. And you talk about
right,
the
right.
astonishing ability for a lot of eels to get around these turbines and these dams. They really, I mean,
Yeah,
it's
they're smart.
they're smart,
They're smart,
smart.
they're only so smart.
Right, of
Right. They're not
course.
always lucky.
They're
Yeah.
not always
Yeah.
Right.
lucky.
Hmm.
I mean,
Hmm.
it's amazing that eels, the tiny little glass eels and elvers can do amazing things in terms of getting up, dams and the walls of dams.
Like
Kind of
outside
crawling
of the
over.
water, you mean?
Yeah,
Yes.
outside of the water, they can actually live outside of the water
That is
for a
so
certain
crazy.
period of time and breathe
I
through their
know.
skin, kind of speaking. And they
Oh
can pile
gosh.
up on top of each other. They'll pile up on top of the dead bodies of dead baby eels to get
Hmm.
over. I mean, it's incredible,
Wow.
over dams. But man, as humans have done a pretty good job of dashing a lot of the abilities of eels, right? So we've got a couple of
Yes.
things going on. First of all, as I said, we've got these hydroelectric facilities. We've got dams, which are a huge problem for eels. We've got
Mm.
overfishing, which
Yeah.
let's
Oh,
not diminish
sure.
that
Right.
because that's a
Of
huge
course.
factor.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
then
Hmm.
there's climate change. I hate to bring it up because it's always the case, but
Right.
it
Hmm.
affects the currents on which
Yeah.
these eels rely to get where they're
Hmm.
going, right? And
Right.
Right.
we've had this radical decline in the number of eels. In Europe, it's been as much as 99% decline. I mean, it's just terrible.
Wow. Wow.
Also, it's very severe decline in Japan. In the United States, it's about 50% decline
Right,
since the
right,
1980s. We're not quite as bad as they are in Europe, but we also don't pay as much attention as they do in
right,
Europe.
right.
Hmm.
So there's real concern that the eel is really going to continue to decline. And as you mentioned, they are an indicator species, but they also are essential in some waterways
Right.
for keeping up the ecosystems, right?
Yep.
They
Yeah.
Yep.
they serve, some creatures like mussels kind of latch on to them in their
Hmm.
larvae state to get
Oh,
distributed in a
oh, right.
waterway. And if
Oh,
there aren't any
interesting.
eels, those mussels don't get distributed, and that
Mm.
waterway can get really polluted because
Yeah.
mussels are a filter,
Right.
Oh,
right?
wow.
They're
So
filter
again,
feeders.
they're
Hmm.
this
Yeah.
they're a connector between one to the other. That's incredible.
Exactly. And
Interesting.
that's true. And they're also an important, they clean up places by eating certain invasive species. And if they're not there, these invasive species can take over. So you don't want to mess, with a severe decline in the American eel because it's a very, 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 very old species. And nature kind of grew up assuming that the eel was going to be there.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
And
Built its whole,
Right.
its whole
The whole
structure
system.
around
Yeah. Hmm.
exactly
yeah, and
that,
vice
that
versa.
the eel
Like
would be there.
they're
Yeah.
so dependent on, like you were saying earlier, and in the book, how their sex is determined by their environment. It's not from
Right.
genetics. It's
Right. Well,
from
it's a
the
combination.
environment they're okay. It's like
Exactly. We don't
okay,
know for
don't
sure.
necessarily okay, okay.
But yeah, that
But
is
depending on what's happening,
definitely
yeah,
directed.
right.
I don't, I say rather than determined, I say
Okay.
directed by
Yeah.
Directed.
environment.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. But I mean, that's true of
Wow.
many things, right? But
Yeah, but that just shows how
there's
vulnerable they'll be.
they're very vulnerable. Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
And the females, the large females, are particularly vulnerable to getting chewed up in these hydroelectric
Right.
generators because they're big
They're
and
Right.
bigger.
Hmm.
they can't,
Yeah. They
find
Can't
their
can't
way
escape
through
as
swoosh
easily.
those.
around.
Right. Yeah.
Right,
Right. Hmm.
right.
Whew.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
So
yeah.
there's these. So then what about, I wanted to also touch on potential viruses impacting eels. And one of the things that I gasped out loud is that you talk about how, let's just say with American eels, they're all genetically identical.
Yes.
So
Pandemic.
explain
Yes.
what's the implication here?
I kind of made a metaphor. I think I did in the book. At least I play with it in my mind about with the lumper potato, the potato
Oh, you did
famine
talk about that in the book. Yes, you did.
yeah, potato famine in Ireland when you have a
Oh,
single a
right.
monoculture of a
Right.
species.
Right.
Um, so yeah, so in the case of the eel, they all kind of descended from the same original eel, the American eel. So there's not a lot of genetic variability, and
Hmm.
therefore, if one eel goes down, they're all threatened, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
that to
So
me, that
that's
made
yeah,
me feel a little like anxious. Like if they get one virus, they're all susceptible. I mean, this isn't, they
they're
don't,
susceptible. They
that's
are.
crazy to
Now,
me.
again, these viruses, they're going to be spreading in the water. It's not an airborne virus that wouldn't concern them.
Right.
So it's not
Right.
quite as bad as it would be for humans, but
Hmm.
it's not great.
Who's to
Yeah.
know?
Right?
It's all a mystery with these
Right.
guys. We don't know, right? I mean,
Right,
yeah, no, but
right.
I hear you. I hear you.
Yeah.
That is just, I mean, to me, that is just, and like we talked about before, there's five anatomical stages of metamorphosis. So they've got like all of these, and let's not forget at the very top, I forgot to mention, they aren't on the Endangered Species Act as well. So
Right,
they
right.
aren't
They're not on the,
protected,
they
right?
aren't, not really. They
So we've got the
they are
pollution,
not
the
on the
dams, everything, and
yes,
yeah.
yeah. There's a big effort to keep them off the endangered species list, both in the United States and in Canada.
By
I
whom?
Okay.
wonder. I wonder what that's driven
Well,
by.
the
Hmm.
fishing
The
lobby.
fishing
Money.
lobbies. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, of
It's
course.
exactly that's
Hmm.
Yeah.
right, Jen. It is money, and um, as you mentioned before, Kate, a lot of fishermen see a lot of eels, and they think there's plenty of eels,
Right.
Hmm.
baby eels. But of
Hmm.
course, in the case, we talked about this before. Given their life cycle, which is so treacherous and
Hmm.
fraught, you
Yeah.
need a heck of a lot of them
That's
to
right.
have a few make it. Okay.
Yes,
So if you,
yes.
and so I use in the book, I use the example of the passenger pigeon because the
Hmm.
passenger pigeon was thought to be so common and so
Hmm.
ubiquitous that you could never get rid of the passenger
Right.
pigeon. But the passenger pigeon requires a lot of individuals. That's how they live. They're not isolated. They live in
Hmm.
communities. When they killed off enough of them so they could no longer form these communities, the species went extinct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so this is what's the same,
Whoops.
similar with the eel. That
Yep.
you
Yeah.
need a lot of baby eels to end up with one adult eel because
Right.
most of
Right.
them die in that journey. The vast majority die in that crazy journey from the
That
That
is
survival
because it's
is
so,
suits.
I mean, a year, who's gonna, yeah,
astonishing.
that is astonishing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Wow.
on the way back, right? Many
Yeah,
Yes.
that's
die and
right.
they're starving. They get eaten
Yeah.
by potbelly sharks. I guess that's what they're called. Anyway, they get
Hmm.
Wow.
eaten
Yeah,
Mm.
for sure.
very commonly. And
Uh-huh.
so very few make it back to spawn. You see?
Yeah,
So this is why we need a large number of them in the
right,
waterways. And then a lot of fishers won't acknowledge that. I'm not going to say they
right.
Yeah.
don't know it because they're smart, but they don't
Yes,
acknowledge that. And so when they
right.
But
speak
maybe they don't
publicly,
know that
you
though.
know,
Maybe they don't
Some
know
may
that they don't
not.
just reproduce in
well,
Right,
Maine. They have to
right.
go all the way back to the sea, a year away, and that's where they're
Well, if
that's where
Freud
they're going
didn't
to
starting
know,
to.
then maybe,
reproduce.
I mean,
Yeah,
that's true because we don't want to talk to people like they're stupid. This is actually,
right,
we're all
right,
being educated here.
right.
Yeah.
Um, So, and Ellen, the story of the eel and how and why they are in danger, to me, this is reminding me of that age-old bad song of the Westerner. We've heard it before. We came, we saw, we took it all. Like you don't have to go back very far. And that's my lyric. So please, if you need to steal that, anyone, that's mine. You'll have to contact Kindred. Um, you don't have to go back very far in,
Trademark.
right? You don't have to go back that far into history and find what we did to the bison, the beaver, like you mentioned, the passenger pigeon, wolves. I could go on. So to me, eels are just another great example of this. Like, however, in your book, you dedicate space for a different perspective, and that is the voice and experience of a native community in Maine, the Passamaquoddy tribe. Apologies if I said that wrong, but I Googled it. It's the closest I could say. So, the Passamaquoddy tribe, when you spoke with members of this tribe, what is their perspective on fishing and conservation of eels? And I will say that in your book, you quote people and highlight their views in their own words, which is really important in this context.
Right. So I spent some time. I should say that there are four different tribes in the state of Maine.
Okay.
The largest tribe, you're absolutely right, is the Passamaquoddy
Okay.
tribe. You were close in the pronunciation. Um, and they are the group, the Passamaquoddy, because they were so, by far the largest group. I hung out with some members. They were kind enough to allow me to visit the reservation and to go down
Mm.
with them when they opened the fishing season.
Ah,
Opening of fishing season for the Elver in Maine is usually March 22nd at midnight.
ah.
So I went, and the Passamaquoddy were down by the water, fishing at midnight, and that's where I first met the people that I spoke with who represent the tribe.
Okay.
And the guy I mentioned, as his name was Saco Basin, that's his last name. But in any
Mm.
case, his father's name is Joe. Joe Saco Basin was a chief
Ah,
of the
okay.
Passamaquoddy tribe for a while.
Right.
But in any case, and he's quite knowledgeable about the eels. So I was very fortunate to have met his son and to also meet him and to spend some time with them and up on the reservation, which is in Princeton, Maine, and Washington County, Maine. Pretty isolated area up there.
Mm.
But beautiful. Okay,
Mm.
so the Native Americans, eel was an incredibly important food for Native Americans.
Mm.
People who have read, there have been books written about this, like Annie Proulx's book, Barkskins. I don't know if any of you have read that, but she
No.
talks. It's a novelist, Annie Proulx, the wonderful novelist. She writes about
Okay.
their dependence on the eel
Okay.
because the eel is we didn't talk about the culinary aspects of the eel, but it's a very fatty fish,
Mm-hmm.
very delicious fish, as long as it's not being grown in a polluted waterway.
Right.
And it's high in calories and relative to other fish, and you can salt it and
Aha.
smoke it and
Aha.
preserve it, right?
Got
Smart.
it.
So
Yes.
the Native Americans, the Maritime Indians in Canada and Maine, really depended on them as a food source through the
Mm.
winters. I mean, very,
Mm.
very much so. It was their some people think it was the major food source in the
Okay.
winters in New England of the Native Americans. So clearly they are great stewards of the eel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And even today in Maine, I think this is so fascinating. There are 425 licenses for individual state fishers, right? You have to apply for this license. It's very hard to get. There's a
Right.
lottery when one becomes available. There are many more people who put in their name for the lottery and pay that are given licenses. It's a very coveted thing these days because it's so valuable.
Right.
But the Native Americans have a different system. They have a group quota for their tribe, so that all the Passamaquoddy are allowed together to fish maybe 1,000 or so pounds of elvers each year, and each individual member is limited to 5 pounds maximum. And they want as many people in the tribe as possible to be able to avail themselves of this resource, right? So
Mhm.
Right.
they don't want a bigger quota
Right.
individually. They
Right.
Not
think of it as a
individually.
group,
Right.
right?
Right.
Right.
It's a
Yes.
group, it's a communal resource,
Mhm.
which is so different. It's
Such a
so
different
Right.
funny.
approach, isn't it?
When you
Yeah.
Well, they
talk to
have
the
like,
native
Mhm.
fishers, they have
Yeah.
yes.
such a different attitude
Yes, they
than
have a
the American
discerning governing
fishers.
of how they
Right.
like only take, and now I'm putting words in
Yeah.
again, and this is, I don't mean to romanticize this. It's just sort of take what you really do need because of that balance.
Well, as you figure it out, if you get 5 pounds of eel and it's going for, in a good year, as much as $3,000 a pound, that's $15,000 for
Mm.
a week of fishing, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
That is, close to half of what someone's yearly salary would be in the
sure.
state
That's
of
a,
Yeah.
Maine,
yeah, it's
living
a
in
lot of
those
money.
parts of
Yeah.
Maine.
Hmm.
So they're perfectly happy. Now, the state fishermen, they're all Americans, of course, I'm sorry. The state fisher, the non-Native American fishers, the largest quota is over 100 pounds.
Oh,
Okay,
wow.
so do the math on that.
Yeah,
That
that
is
seems
right,
inequitable.
and,
Yeah.
and they don't want more licenses to get out. They want higher quotas, right?
Of
They don't want to
course.
Mhm.
share
Yeah.
that wealth. They
Right.
want
Right.
They want to
they
keep more for themselves. Yeah. Mhm.
exactly.
The
So even though
opposite.
they
The opposite.
right when they
There, play that
lobby.
song again, Sam.
Right. When they
Yeah.
lobby for a growth in the quota, they want their individual quotas generally to be higher, not to have more people be able to
Mhm.
get the
Right.
license. So it's
Right.
Right.
a very different mindset,
Mhm.
and,
Hmm.
and these two populations, and it was so dramatic, and it was a real education for me.
Mm.
I wasn't as aware as I should have been of this, use of resources, and how the Native Americans obviously have been fighting to be able to retain control over the resources that they have. And
Yeah.
there were, I'm not saying you're right, absolutely, Jen. You don't want to romanticize. I'm sure, I know that there were Native Americans who were breaking the rules. I
Right.
talked to the chief, Joe
Sure.
Saco
I
Basin,
mean,
about
people are
this.
people. Yeah. Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I said, what do you do when that happens? He said, we go and talk to them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The elders talk to them.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much we know what happened after that. It was
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
taken care of, right?
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. You
You
don't want
Yes.
know,
that consequence. Yeah.
you
And
don't want to be
I mean,
talked to.
no. And we have talked,
Right.
Kate, to other Native Americans about. We've talked to other people about the Native American fishing thing, and it's just so different all the way across the board. Like with salmon, right? We've talked
It's a
about that before,
stewardship instead
right?
of
It
a
is.
business.
Yeah. It doesn't mean
And
that
it's
there aren't bad actors, because
Sure,
there
of
are
right,
bad
course.
that's right.
actors.
But
And
But
it's
they
more of
yes.
agree.
a reciprocal benefit. Like they want to help take care of the fish so that the fish help them take care of themselves,
Yeah.
right? It's that a
Right.
little bit different. It's
Right.
not like we'll take as much as we can and there's probably going to be plenty forever, and then,
Right.
it just is it's a
Right.
different mentality. Yeah.
Oh, it
It's a
sure
In
very
is.
general.
different mentality.
In
Yeah.
general.
Exactly.
In general,
Yeah.
and that's the thing. I think that's where it's this and Ellen, I have to say this was one of my hugest takeaways with your book was again, we are talking about this Western perspective of rolling in and just taking and taking, and then when it's all gone, being like, oh well, I'll just move on to the next thing. Just sort of turn around and focus on something else. And I'm generalizing, and still, this is an old song to me, especially here in this country. And I think it's one of the, I mean, the eel is such a prime example of this. Just because there's millions or billions of them doesn't mean like again, just look at what we talked about with their migration. This is an epic journey where naturally, organically, within their own conservation of themselves, so they're not trillions and trillions, many of them die. And nature balances and sustains itself left to itself and governed with that idea of reciprocity because it's embedded in them to have this. The Western perspective doesn't seem to have this as so much right now. And I think that was one reason I was so appreciative of you writing this book too, is we need to highlight and because here at Kindred, we like to elevate, represent, and normalize animals in nature as best we can. And I feel like the eels so beautifully represent that. And I understand what hooked you into writing this book. It's an age-old story, and yet it continues to the detriment of our environments and to ourselves, to us humans.
I agree, but I want to put a little caveat in there. All the scientists that I met, were working so hard to try and protect the eel and to truly understand its life cycle so they could protect the eel.
Hmm.
Those are Western scientists. I did obviously speak with Japanese scientists as well, because Japanese eel is important.
Yeah.
But these are Western scientists. Also, some fishermen are, gradually becoming more aware, Western fishermen.
Right.
So, again, I live in Maine,
Mhm.
half my year, and I'm surrounded by lobstermen, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
And
yeah.
lobstermen have become very, very conscious of environmental issues and preserving lobster. Now it's a little late in the
Yeah.
game for the lobster,
Yeah.
but not necessarily their fault. I mean, this is due to global warming. This is not
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
fault. So
Yep.
they're pretty eager
Hmm.
conservationists, and I think the
That's
Elver
very
gold
encouraging, isn't
rush,
that? Isn't that
Yeah.
yeah,
encouraging that we can learn and we can educate and we
we
can shift
Yes.
the
can, we
narrative?
can.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you
Yes.
have to,
Yes.
so the Elver has only recently become valuable, right? It's
Hmm.
only
Mm.
been valuable really for less than 20 years. I mean,
Right.
so, I mean, actually less than 15 years, really. And
Hmm.
so there's a gold rush and there's some
Yeah.
bad,
Yeah. That's a
bad,
good way
bad
to say it.
players,
Yeah.
There's
bad
always
But
a
that's the
players.
grab. There's always a
Yeah.
grab, a money grab
But
when
but
there's
not
gold rush,
everybody
right?
falls.
Yeah.
I want to be careful because I
absolutely. And
know,
that's a great caveat. You're right.
yeah,
That's
there's some
very
very,
true.
very responsible
Mhm.
Elver fishers. Many of them have been in the business. They were in the
Yeah.
business before it was this
Yeah.
lucrative,
Well,
right?
and you highlight one of these gentlemen in the book. You talked to one gentleman who was like, he's really working he has a nice life and
Right,
he's creating a nice life for his family, but he's
right.
doing it in integrity.
Daryl
And
Young, yes,
yes,
Daryl Young,
yes,
and he
yes,
was the
yes.
head of the Elver Association for the state of Maine. I think he's just stepped down, but yeah, I mean, he admits, I mean, not admits, he's made a very good life for himself,
Yeah.
Hmm.
out of the Elver business,
Hmm.
and for
And that
him and
can
his
be okay.
family, and that's a
Yeah.
good
We don't
thing
begrudge
because
anyone making a living.
No,
Right.
you just
That's
exactly,
don't
right.
need
Yeah.
to.
rural Maine is a tough place,
It
I
is a
bet it
right?
tough
is. I
place.
bet it
So
Yes.
is.
this is why, the introduction of this eel farm by Sarah
Mm,
Rodemaker
yep.
is hopeful because
Hmm.
Yeah.
that's an industry that could be very helpful to
Yeah.
the state, which is why the state has supported it,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
A lot of the funding she got was from the state, and they're hoping to bring the eel farming industry back home and take it, and have rather than send the eels to China. As I say, a
Right.
Yes.
thousand eel farms on China. I mean, it's
Yeah.
a massive industry in
Yeah.
China,
And I
massive.
and I will say though, I don't prefer any animal being a resource as far as like within an industry. I don't love that. I will say that I feel like we have a lot of, industry that is created where you can. I'm not sure that we should. Um, but that's a subject for another conversation. We'll have
Well,
to.
no, it's not because
Okay.
when I was in Bermuda, I talked to the head of the expedition about this. As I
Yeah.
mentioned, he works in a German institute, and I said, well, should we not be eating eel at all? And he said, oh no, no. He said we
Yeah.
must eat eel because if we don't eat it, we're not going to care about it.
Aha.
good point.
right?
Yeah.
And so he
Interesting.
said, I don't want to kill the industry. I want it to be managed responsibly.
Yeah.
And
Yes, 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 yes. That's
at
exactly
the
the goal.
right, he also
That's the
told me
goal.
that
Right.
Americans don't give a damn about eels. That's why he did
Hmm.
say that.
Yeah.
So he was
Mm.
he was worried about the American eel.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Europeans are taking steps now, and
Okay.
We're
Okay.
always a
so
little
yeah.
behind here, I think.
Oh, on many,
We're
many
trying.
things.
We're trying. Well,
Yeah.
listen,
Many
your
things.
your your book is helping, and after reading your book and hearing many stories about how, how actually sweet eels can be with people and be, quote unquote friendly, and how much people fall in love with them.
They do.
I
It's
well,
amazing.
I have a totally different perspective of this slippery beast that you titled your book, and I also challenge our listeners to welcome them into their hearts, and through your telling of the long and complicated story of the eel, we only scratch the surface of these subjects. But Ellen, can you please tell us where we can find your book to purchase?
Oh my gosh. Well, anywhere.
Anywhere.
Mhm.
I mean, bookstore. I'm a
Okay.
big fan of independent bookstores.
Okay.
Yeah.
Please,
So we can
if you're
find it in our
desperate,
favorite bookstore. Okay,
yeah,
good to
it's
know.
obviously available on Amazon, but we don't know how we feel about Amazon right now.
Right.
Fair.
Um,
Agreed. Hmm.
so, local bookstores, independent
Great.
bookstores have been very
Great.
good to me, and they're very good to the public. And
Okay.
I'd love it if folks would, if the bookstore doesn't have it, ask them to
A
order
lot of them
it.
will order
Yeah.
it.
You
Yeah.
know,
Right.
they
Yeah,
will
right.
order it.
Right.
So,
Do,
the
do
smaller
you
ones might not have it in stock. So,
Now, this is your fifth book, I
yeah,
believe. And
yeah,
do you have a
yeah,
website where we can find any of your other work and keep an eye out for
yeah,
what work might be coming?
yeah, yeah. So it's ellenshell.com.
Okay,
ellenshell.com. It
that's
was Ellen
easy.
Ruppel Shell, but someone pirated it.
Ooh,
And
Really? That's
rude.
rude. How rude.
Ew. Ew,
so they wanted to
people.
sell it back to me, and I said no, thank you. So
Oh my.
it's now I had to create a new website, so it's
Okay.
ellenshell.com.
That couldn't
Yeah,
be easier. ellenshell.com is easy
yeah.
to remember. Please, to our listeners, take a look at Slippery Beast, a true crime natural history with eels. Thank you so much for this book. Thank you for your time today. This was just a really, really interesting conversation, and just so much fun to have with you. And we really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you for your incredible questions. Those were great.
Oh,
Seriously.
Well,
well, it
thank
was
you.
a really
Yeah.
fun conversation.
Yeah,
Thank
really,
you.
really fun. And I just think too, it's easier to think of good questions when you bring up things, when we dig into these stories and these beasts that we don't get to, Jen and I don't really get to, I'm not writing a book. You're welcome. And so it's great that you do. So we really appreciate it. And thanks so much for your time.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you,
All
Barb.
right, take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye. Kindred is hosted by me and my sister Jen, produced by Kat Gaddy and myself, sound production and editing by Dan Cooper, original music by Ellie Grace, and our Kindred artwork was created by Lindsay Coffin. Please follow, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts, and feel free to contact us through our website at kindredpodcast.co, where you can also find details about Kindred Plus, our subscription service, as well as links to our social media accounts and show notes.